Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, after receiving reports of suspected H5N8 bird flu outside of confirmed infection areas, authorities will now cull ducks within a 3-kilometre radius of infected farms. On the eve of her opening speech at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, President Park discusses boosting cooperation in the up-and-coming Internet of Everything industry with the head of US network firm Cisco. She also promotes her vision for a creative economy. Plus, as anti-government protests intensify ahead of next month's election, the Thai government issues a 60-day state of emergency in an attempt to quell violence in Bangkok and its surrounding provinces. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Wednesday, January 22nd. I'm Choi Yusan in Seoul. We begin with the latest on the bird flu outbreak here in Korea, with a number of suspected H5N8 bird flu outside confirmed infection areas. Concerns are rising. The latest avian influenza outbreak may have already gone nationwide. Kwon So-ah has the latest.
Fears of a nationwide bird flu outbreak in Korea are growing. Disease prevention authorities said Tuesday that they suspect a duck farm in the southern city of Jeongup in Jeollabuk-do province has been infected with avian influenza. If their suspicions prove true, it would be the first case of AI outside of Gochang and Buan counties, the source of the recent AI outbreaks, and would mean that the risk of birds carrying the virus to other places has increased. With that in mind, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs announced Tuesday that all ducks within a 3-kilometre radius of the infected farms will be culled. That's a much wider area than the 500-metre radius set earlier, but for now, the order excludes chicken. Earlier in the day, authorities confirmed that the number of poultry farms in Buan and Gochang that have ducks infected with the highly pathogenic H5N8 strain of avian influenza has risen to 4. The same strain of the virus was confirmed in a group of wild ducks found dead in a reservoir near a poultry farm in Gochang on Monday. Officials say this, as well as several more suspicious cases, including a recent one on Jeju Island, increases the chance that migratory ducks are the source of the bird flu outbreak. More specifically, they're pointing to a type of duck called the Baikal teal, which fly in from Russia to Korea for the winter. Korea has a total of 37 wintering sites for migratory birds. The Ministry of Environment has said it will track the Baikal teal's route via GPS to calculate the possibility of a further virus spread. Meanwhile, sales of poultry products have dropped significantly over the last couple of days, which is raising concerns in the distribution industry ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday. Health authorities say, however, that there is a very slim chance that the infected products have or will enter the market, and even if they do, the virus is destroyed once cooked at 75 degrees Celsius for at least 5 minutes. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And over now to the worst data leak in Korea's history. The financial institutions in question are struggling to placate thousands of angry customers who are concerned their personal information may have fallen into unscrupulous hands. The government says it will unveil measures on this Wednesday to prevent such a massive breach from happening again. Kim Young-gil has more.
Thousands of angry customers swarmed into their banks for a second straight day on Tuesday to get their credit card details changed and to file complaints about the credit card firm's mismanagement of their personal information. Their actions follow in the wake of what has become one of the biggest information leaks in the nation's history, with up to 20 million people in Korea having been affected.
I've been waiting here for more than an hour and I'm dumbfounded by the whole situation. Financial institutions are responsible for protecting our assets and personal information, not leaking it. They should compensate for any damages that customers may incur.
Concerns arising that customers' information may have fallen into the hands of scammers, with reports emerging that suspicious and unintended financial transactions have been made on accounts.
The leak is one of the worst in the country's history, with the personal data, bank account details, addresses, and credit ratings of millions of people now out in the open.
The three card firms KB Card, NH Nongyap Card, and Lotte Card said they will fully cover any financial losses suffered by their customers from scams linked to the data leak. On Wednesday, the government will announce a set of preventive measures to stop similar data leaks from occurring, as well as toughened penalties for those involved in leaking data. These are expected to include stronger monitoring of staff at financial companies involved in customer data management, tougher regulations to prevent financial firms from sharing client data with their affiliates, and stronger punitive measures on financial institutions and their executives in case of data leaks. This information leak comes less than 1 month after the personal data of some 130,000 Standard Chartered Bank Korea and Citibank Korea customers was stolen. 지명길, Arirang News.
Independent lawmaker An Chul-soo says he will launch a new political party in March ahead of local elections in June. Speaking at a press conference Tuesday, Yoon Ye-jun, co-chair of An's new politics committee, said a preparatory body to oversee the party's formation will be established sometime next month. This means the June 4th local elections will be a three-way race between the ruling and main opposition parties and An's new party. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns, who kicked off a regional tour in Seoul, spent the day discussing challenges posed by the North Korean leadership and Pyongyang's recent peace offensive in particular. Instead of a sign of hope, he said it could be an early indicator of provocations to come. Hwang Sung-hee has more.
North Korea has seemingly been on a peace offensive in the new year. But visiting U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns says the regime's tendency to have a sudden change of heart worries Washington.
Well, I think the United States and our friends here in the Republic of Korea share a lot of concern about the recent behavior of the DPRK leadership and the dangers of further reckless behavior and provocation in the future, as I said.
There was a dramatic change in Pyongyang's attitude towards Seoul after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's once powerful uncle, Chang Song-taek, was executed late last year. Following its proposal last week to end all cross-border slandering, Pyongyang has persistently expressed a strong will to improve inter-Korean ties. South Korea scoffed at the offer, with President Park Geun-hye telling the government to remain vigilant as the North engages in its propaganda offensive. After a meeting with South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Kim Gyu-hyun in Seoul on Tuesday, Burns reaffirmed Washington's commitment to its ally.
I express once again the strong American support for President Park's principled approach to the DPRK and stressed once again the strong American support for the defense and security of the Republic of Korea.
The U.S. diplomat is expected to discuss the current state of North Korea with officials in China before moving on to Japan, where the country's denials of historical wrongdoings will be taken up. Once Burns wraps up his trip, U.S. Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs Daniel Russell, who will accompany Burns in China and Japan, will visit Seoul on Sunday to share the results of the discussions in Beijing and Tokyo. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And staying with North Korea's peace offensive, South Korea's unification minister Ryu Gil-jae has dismissed Pyongyang's proposal to end all cross-border hostilities and provocations, saying the offer does not make sense. Speaking at a forum on Tuesday, Ryu said North Korea made the proposal last week, knowing full well that South Korea could not accept it. Instead, the minister called for the resumption of reunions for families separated since the Korean War, which Pyongyang had unilaterally called off at the last minute in September of last year. The South Korean trade official who was kidnapped in the Libyan capital of Tripoli on Sunday is safe, according to an official from Korea's foreign ministry. Han Seok-woo, the head of the local branch of the state-run Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, was abducted by 4 armed men on his way home from work on Sunday. Citing a source with information about the incident, Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency reports the kidnappers are members of a small militia group based in Tripoli, and the Libyan government and the militia are secretly negotiating a ransom payment. Other Korean media outlets have reported the gunmen asked for around $2 million, something Korea's foreign ministry denies. The ministry says the government would never expose information about the kidnappers or a potential ransom for the sake of the victims' safety.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiation.
President Park Geun-hye, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a.
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday. President Park Geun-hye has arrived in Davos on Tuesday to attend this year's World Economic Forum. Ahead of the official opening of the forum, President Park spent a busy day meeting with business leaders from around the world to urge them to invest more in Korea. Our presidential correspondent Oh Jin-ju has the details.
Promoting Korea to the world's business leaders was the name of the game for President Park on the eve of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Upon her arrival in the Swiss city on Tuesday afternoon, President Park met with Cisco CEO John Chambers and discussed ways to cooperate in the sector of Internet of Everything. Internet of Everything is a rising industry that aims at connecting objects in homes, offices, cars, and elsewhere to the Internet so they automatically adjust to the people's needs and preferences. President Park asked Cisco to actively invest in Korea and closely work with Korean firms to help the nation realize her vision of a so-called creative economy. Chambers said Cisco's joint project with the British government to develop the European country's high-tech industry is very similar to President Park's push for the creative economy. He then said he would be very happy to expand cooperation with Korean institutions and companies in the sector. The president also took part in Korean Night, an event dedicated to promoting Korean culture and technology, which has been held in Davos for 6 straight years now. It also serves as an opportunity to network with global figures that attend the WEF. Among those in attendance were Lloyd's chairman John Nelson and Jacob Frenkel, chairman of JP Morgan Chase International. President Park called for further investment in Korea, emphasizing that Korea is becoming a better environment for foreign businesses, with the Korean parliament having passed a bill on the revised Act of Foreign Investment Promotion. President Park will be making an opening speech on the creative economy and entrepreneurship in the first session of this year's World Economic Forum on Wednesday. She will also pitch Korea's qualities to the CEOs of global companies like Qualcomm, Aramco, and Siemens. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News, Bern.
The International Monetary Fund has revised up its growth forecast for the world economy this year by a small margin to 3.7%. The fund, however, highlighted the need for emerging economies to manage subdued domestic demand. Our Hwang Ji-ae also tells us what the IMF expects from the U.S. Federal Reserve's stimulus tapering.
In its updated World Economic Outlook on Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund revised its outlook for this year to 3.7%, up 0.1 percentage points from its earlier forecast. The fund expects the world economy to expand 3.9% in 2015. The IMF said the upward revision comes largely on the economic recovery in advanced nations, which is also leading a rebound in exports in emerging economies. That is reflected in the IMF forecast, which revised up its growth outlook for the U.S. in 2014 to 2.8% and the Eurozone economies to 1%.
The Korean economy is also expected to pick up next year on strong external demands.
The global economic recovery will lead to expanded exports of Korean products. That will eventually lead to a recovery in the domestic economy.
The IMF, however, cited weak domestic demand in emerging nations as remaining concerns. It went on to say that domestic weakness combined with capital outflows prompted by the U.S. Federal Reserve's bond-buying stimulus tapering could result in sharper capital outflows and exchange rate adjustments. The Korean government has pledged to focus this year's economic policies on boosting domestic demand to create more jobs and achieve a balanced economy. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Korea's venture investments reached a record high last year, rising more than 12% compared to a year earlier. The Small and Medium Business Administration and the Korean Venture Capital Association announced Tuesday that investments in ventures reached 1.8 trillion won, or roughly $1.4 billion in 2013. That's the highest level since 2001. Officials attribute the rise to the Park Geun-hye administration's drive to push for a more efficient framework for startups. In the face of growing violence, the government of Thailand has declared a 60-day state of emergency in Bangkok and its surrounding provinces starting on this Wednesday. The move, announced after a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, allows for curfews to be imposed, for suspects to be held without charges, and for bans of political gatherings. Anti-government protesters have blocked off parts of the capital city in an attempt to get Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra to step down, and the rallies have turned more violent in recent days. Over 24 people were injured in 2 explosions at a demonstration site in Bangkok on Sunday. Since the protest began in November, 9 people have died and hundreds more have been wounded. Syria stands accused of systematic killings and torture on a truly horrific scale on the eve of international talks in Switzerland aimed at ending the conflict in Syria. A team of former international war crimes prosecutors have released documents and ample photo evidence to back their claims. The U.S. State Department has condemned Syria in the strongest possible way for the latest findings, which show the Assad regime tortured and executed about 11,000 detainees. The world's leading human rights advocacy group, Human Rights Watch, has slammed the international community for focusing too much on bringing President Bashar al-Assad and his government to the negotiating table over humanitarian matters. The group also criticized Syria's close allies, Russia and China, for turning a blind eye to the humanitarian crisis in the country. Renowned Korean poet Ko Eun has been selected as the winner of this year's Golden Wreath, one of the most prestigious awards for poets. The award is given by Struga Poetry Evenings, which is an international poetry festival held annually. Ko is the first Korean to ever win the award and will pick it up in August. Former winners include Pablo Neruda and Allen Ginsberg.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off in the KBO. Now, one of the biggest controversies of last season were all the blown calls by the umpires. And now the league is looking to implement a new video replay system that will change all that. Now, following the footsteps of Major League Baseball, who will begin using this new video replay system that includes 12 different cameras being added around the stadiums, the KBO hopes to do just that by 2015. By utilizing such system, the umpires can take a look at 13 different close calls at any given moment. And staying with baseball, while Japan has the Tokyo Dome and the U.S. has the Tropicana Field, Korea doesn't have a dome stadium just yet. And with the nation's first dome stadium completing its construction next year in Seoul, they're still looking for a team to bring in. And while the LG Twins and the Tucson Bears will most likely stay in Jamsil Stadium, the Nexen Heroes are the likely suitors for the new stadium. And according to the officials in charge of the new stadium, they'll finalize everything by the first half of this season and begin playing in the stadium by 2015. More baseball this time in Major League Baseball, where Im Chang-young just might be able to return to the majors. After being released as a non-tender, the 38-year-old reliever was invited by the same team that released him, as the Chicago Cubs invited him to the spring camp. And while chances are still slim that he'll earn a spot on the roster, the former Samsung Lion continues to work out this offseason, hoping for a second chance. And shifting gears and over to hockey, where the Korean national hockey team will soon add 2 more Canadians onto their squad. Now, 2 Canadian forwards, Brian Young and Michael Swift, is in the process of receiving their Korean citizenship in hopes to join the national team. While the papers are still being processed, it's likely that they'll become the 2nd and 3rd Canadians to become naturalized Korean citizens since Brock Radunsky became a Korean last year. And finishing things off with some Tuesday night KBL action as the Ulsan Mobis Phoebus took on the Changwon LG Sakers. And jumping right into the action here, the LG Sakers off to a great start, take a comfortable 18-12 lead after the first quarter before Mobis cuts the deficit to 36-31 going into halftime. But in the third quarter, LG continues to run away with the game until Mobis starts rallying big in the fourth quarter, including this one, Park Gu-young draining a 3 with 11 seconds left to tie the game 67-67. But Davon Jefferson, who had a monster game, sinks the game winner as time expires, as LG takes the thriller 69-67, with Davon Jefferson finishing off with 32 points. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good Wednesday morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Well, it's freezing this morning. Morning low in Seoul is starting out at -8 degrees Celsius, and the rest of the country is also waking up to cold mornings. So please bundle up tight to stay warm today. But temperatures will bounce back to above freezing by afternoon here in Seoul. So most of the nation should start the day under lots of the sun, but the central area might see a thin layer of smog this morning, which should burn off quickly. And as we go through the day, we'll see increase of clouds. So overall, it will be mostly to partly sunny day today. So the weather outlook for the rest of the week is looking not too bad. A cold snap will ease up this afternoon, and daytime highs will hike up to 6 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. And on Friday, it will be even milder, hiking up to 8 degrees here in the capital. But on Saturday, we have rain in the forecast nationwide, but that pockets of showers on add a chill to the air. So please keep that in mind, and here are the readings for today. Morning low in Seoul is at -8 and will get up to 2, and Daegu and Gwangju will wake up to low of -6 and see a high of 5 and 4 respectively, while Busan top out at 6. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will climb up to 6 in the afternoon. Daejeon will get up to 2, while the top temperatures on Kumgangsan Mountain will be at -4. Now don't forget to bundle up tight before heading out, and hope you have a wonderful day.
And those are the stories we're following on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak. Stay with us throughout the day as we bring you the latest headlines.